Our final speaker today, Richard Froeschle. He is a labor market economist and a highly regarded speaker on a wide array of topics related to the Texas economy and workforce and education programs. He is a former director of the labor market, He is a former director of the Labor Market and Career Information Department at the Texas Workforce Commission. He's also served as director of the Texas State Occupational Information Coordinating Committee and is a labor economist with the Texas Department of Community Affairs. Prior to his work with state government, Mr. Froeschle conducted in-service training with the National Labor Market Information Training Institute at the University of North Texas in the areas of strategic planning and regional economic analysis for state and federal employment and training programs. Mr. Froeschle has a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Texas at Austin and a master's degree in manpower and industrial relations from the University of North Texas, where he also taught microeconomics, regional labor market analysis, and workforce strategic planning. His writings include 4 books, Where the Jobs Are, Connecting the Dots, Working Texas Style, and An Atmosphere of Enterprise, a dozen monographs including Targeting Your Labor Market, Getting Down to Business in the Texas Economy, An Age of Global Economic Opportunity, and many related essays and briefs, all focused on the application of labor market and career information and education policy, workforce planning, and education development. Finally, Mr. Froeschle has made presentations at over 450 conference events over the past decade on a variety of labor market topics. His professional specialties and interests are in the fields of regional economic analysis, labor market dynamics, skill and job analysis, and the development and interpretation of labor market information, for all of which have occupied his career for the last 37 years. Please help me in welcoming Mr. Froeschle.
Okay, welcome to my sadistic friends. Anybody that's going to spend an afternoon with a financial specialist, going into a lawyer, and then listening to a marketing specialist, and ending up with an economist is a brutal lineup this afternoon. So I know that I'm the only person between you and the bartender, and I hope it's the bartender, not the executioner, because that's the way this thing is kind of headed. We're going to talk a little bit about labor shortages in the context of the trucking industry and occupations. Truck driving, worker shortages as issues. I'm going to get behind the podium in just a minute if this will make you feel better, all right? But I just want to stand here. Nothing like seeing these young guys just panic when things don't know where they get started. Like I said, I usually do I do this for a living in terms of talking about the labor market and different aspects. Does this make you happy? Good, I knew it would. But one of the things we love to do, anybody do presentations for a living, any way, shape, or form? Right? You like to move, right? You like to get some energy, especially if you're the last guy before the bartender. So unfortunately, I'm going to be here. We're going to have to let the content drive itself. So today's issue, as we start talking about this, kind of works like this. Is this going to go? There you go. How many took an economics class any place in their life? Anybody? Mm-hmm. How many swore you'd never take another one? Mm-hmm. Usually about 90%. Truth of the matter is, you're all economists in some way, shape, or form, and in many ways, I feel really sheepish coming up and talking about the economics of the transportation industry and truck driving, because y'all know more about this really than I do. But what I'm going to do is put some of that in context with the larger demographics of what's going on in the state, and I think, and I'm hoping that's going to be a very interesting prospect for you. So anybody that does economics knows that there's really 2 aspects to it. There is some science, all right? There's supply and demand and all this other good stuff. Makes a lot of sense. Then there's the part that really is more like this. And so you can take any 2 economists, put them side by side, have them address the same issue, and you're liable to get 2 different interpretations. So I'm kind of your economic storyteller for the day to talk about this in the context of anecdotes, in terms of data, and in terms of some theory that ties all that together. So let me start here. Guess what? In the United States, truck driving is big, it's important, and it is likely to change. Everybody on board with this? Does anybody think that the transportation sector in this country and truck driving as an occupation is not on the precipice of change? Anybody? If this particular map is really interesting. This shows that there are 28 states in which truck driver is the #1 employed occupation in the United States. And this map is actually from a website from NPR. If you go to that website, and this slide should be made available to anybody that wants a copy of it. If you go to that site, you'll see in 1975, anybody know what the #1 occupation was in 25 states? Guess? Anybody? Wasn't farming, but farming had about 10 states. Anybody else? Secretary. Secretary. Not executive assistant, secretary. All right? We're talking about 25 different states. So as technology changes certain aspects of the labor market, so is it going to begin to change the transportation sector. Now, we're here to talk about labor shortage related issues. Truck driving industry and the transportation sector as a whole is not the only group that is experiencing these issues. We're going to talk about this in a minute, but when you've got an area with a 4.4% unemployment rate and you've got about 10 metropolitan areas that have unemployment rates below that, guess what? You have general labor shortages that are affecting almost every sector of the economy. So we've got two phenomena going on. You've got general labor shortages that are affecting the availability of workers in lots of different occupations, industries, and regions. And then you have specific occupational skill shortages. It just so happens that the transportation industry and truck driving in particular is experiencing both of those. That's why your pain point is a little tighter than some others. So here's some things. You know you have labor shortages when you have rapid population expansion, all right, when all of a sudden you've got more population growth than you have the ability to grow the labor force, leading to congestion, rising housing prices, all that sort of thing. Do we have that in Texas? Do you have that in Austin? You have it in Houston, in Dallas, in every area in the Texas Triangle? And the answer is yes. So you have shortages of labor in retail, in finance, in construction, in a lot of other different sectors, not the least of which transportation. Number two, when the unemployment rate is consistently below what we would call the natural rate of unemployment. I just talked about that. It already is. When you've got an unemployment rate that's consistently below 5.5%, you have emerging labor shortages across the board. Number three, when the rate of growth exceeds growth in the labor force. This is particularly interesting when you look at the data. Truth of the matter is, when you look in Texas over about the last 10 years, we have actually grown jobs faster than we've grown the labor force. So that means we've been sucking all of the available labor force out to fill those jobs. What's that leaving us with? Sort of the bottom end of the labor availability, and even that is starting to dry up. Number four, occupations are critical to multiple high-growth industries. Walmart employ any truck drivers these days? Do people with CDLs find themselves employed in more than just over-the-road truck driving? As we start looking at truck driving as an occupation, and all those who hold a CDL and the competition for them, especially in the oil and gas industry, and we'll talk a little bit about that, you see that the competition is outpacing the availability. Number five, more job postings than there are new hires. How many of you are taking a little longer time between the point of interview and the point of hire than you did 5 years ago? What do you think? More time, less time? On average, it's a lot more time. It's very interesting. We start talking about marketing and branding and internal culture. We've got a lot of companies, Rackspace, Toyota, a lot of companies that says, you know, we're just hiring for fit here. We're going to teach the skills later on. We're looking for people that are going to come in and embrace our culture first. And so this issue of finding people and making sure they're the right fit for the culture just takes a little longer. So the uptake is a little longer, and we're seeing that across a lot of different areas. Number six, rising wage rates for specific occupations and skill sets. If you have rising wage rates, what does that usually mean? You got more demand than you have supply. What has been happening with wage rates in the trucking industry? They've been relatively stagnant across the board. It's one indicator in all of this that's particularly interesting, because when you have shortages, you should have rising wage rates across the occupational spectrum, we don't see that. We'll talk about that in a minute. And number seven, word on the street. Society, businesses, everybody is saying, hey, we cannot find the workers that we need. Now, for those of you that took that economics class someplace along the way, and we did these little supply-demand things, anybody remember what that supply and demand at? A prevailing wage rate. I spent 36 years in the workforce system, and we had employers come to us all the time. They say, you know, we can't find the workers that we need. And he said, well, what do you pay them? He said, well, here's the wage rate. And we look at the median wage or the average wage in that region for that occupation. Let's say we find that that wage rate is below the median. And you say, the answer to that question is, maybe, is are you paying a wage rate that is at an appropriate level to attract and change the supply-demand scenario? And we've talked about that here, and I'll talk about a little bit more later. And then last but not least, overwhelming technology change. The qualified labor just still is not available. And so when we start talking about trucking and overwhelming technology change, is there anything interesting going on? And the answer is, let's talk real briefly about the elephant in the room, all right? Which in the labor market standpoint is autonomous vehicles. So the truth of the matter is autonomous trucking and everything that's associated with that, is it reshaping road transportation and worker demand? How many do not believe that autonomous technology is going to change your world? You don't believe it will? Then you're really...
Not dramatically, I don't.
Okay, so that's good. So here's the skeptic. Here are the skeptic arguments about that. One, the high cost of self-driving trucks and technology relative to cost savings. Sure, there's going to be some cost savings, but you know, computers break down too. You know, there's lots of other costs associated. Are we really going to save that much money to afford the cost or make the return on investment of the technology, make it viable in the near term? Two, there are regulatory hurdles to clear. Anybody tried to fight state government, city hall, federal government rules? There are so many rules and regulations that have to be overcome. Is that going to happen tomorrow? The answer is no, it's not going to happen tomorrow. Number three, social acceptance of autonomous 18-wheelers on the highways. When I was a kid, we used to freak out when somebody was driving down the road, little person, steering wheel up here, right, and go, hey, there's no driver, you know, and you'd freak out. Can you imagine driving along the road, look up at an 18-wheeler and not see a vehicle and not see a driver in there? Would you freak out? People generally don't like to drive around trucks even when they have a driver in them. Now you start telling them there's no driver in that truck. Will it freak people out? Is there a social acceptance that's associated with that? Truth of the matter is there is some, and there probably will be. And then here's some others. You know, city streets are tough to navigate. Who pumps the gas and who does all the other ancillary duties associated with that? And the other thing is sort of the last mile argument. It's great to do technology point-to-point autonomous driving, but who is going to drive the last miles? Who's going to take all of those other smaller routes that are the less profitable routes? We saw that in federal package delivery. I think the same thing will be happening in the trucking industry. So this is some of the skeptical or the counter arguments, but the truth of the matter is, they're here. They're already functioning, and some people are really taking advantage of them. You've probably seen this as the Rio Tinto mining operation. These are all self-driving trucks. They're point-to-point operations. They don't ever ask for a break. They work the same shifts that everybody else is working. They've saved about 15%. Interesting argument. Is a 15% savings worth all of the upfront investment in the technology? Okay, jury's still out on that, but this is working. Uber. Everybody have an Uber account? Everybody drive Uber, right? Everybody know about Uber Freight and what Uber Freight is doing to try to look at automating the world. Now, they bought this company called Otto. They have subsequently had some legal issues and the like, but their self-driving vehicle, Otto, had a completely autonomous shipment working with Budweiser. It's kind of fun if you haven't seen all the video, okay? And then this one, the whole platooning, the whole drafting issue of taking a truck up front, putting a driver in it, and then drafting other autonomously connected vehicles. This is happening all over the place. So the truth of the matter is, we see this around. You guys have many more examples than I have. But when you look around, it is here, it is coming. And betting against technology has been a really bad bet for a lot of industries across the board. Here's one of my favorites. Here's the guy in the autonomous vehicle. I'm not really a truck driver. I'm a truck monitor. You know, I don't actually drive the truck. I just warn you before it's about to crash. The reason I show you this is twofold. If you have autonomous driving, you have autonomous drivers, they're going to have to be, in many cases, there's still going to be somebody in there, a co-driver in some way, shape, or form. Do you pay this guy more or less than what you currently pay truck drivers? You're going to pay him more or less than what you pay your current truck drivers? How many say more? Why? You just want to raise your hand because it's getting tired? Okay, a liability issue. Who else says more?
You'll have to be smarter.
You have to be smarter. Smarter to be smarter than what?
The driver now.
Okay, so but what does he have to know?
Technology.
Okay, all the technology associated with that. How many people think less or the same? How many choose not to think about this issue until it really hits them? All right, there you go. All right, now here's the interesting part. My personal belief as an economist is the answer is more. And the reason is more is that not only have to be able to have the license, be able to drive the truck if and when necessary, but also understand all the systems that are associated with that truck. Okay? I had this very interesting conversation with the director of the chancellor of Texas State Technical College. I asked him this exact same question. I said, are those truck drivers going to be making more or less in the future with autonomous vehicles? You know what he told me? I don't know. So for those of you that didn't have an answer to that question, you are just as smart as the chancellor of the higher education system, all right? Truth of the matter is, however, we do believe that it's going to affect pay rates and availability. It's also going to affect the demand for truck drivers, the demand for other positions, global positioning, logistics, truck design and assembly, all those battery-powered cars, different systems, autonomous systems design, and then truck maintenance mechanics, what they have to know and the like. So as you get into this autonomous vehicles, it's not just the drivers, it's your entire maintenance operation and the different kinds of systems, whether they're battery-powered trucks, all the different electronic systems that are associated with that. The truck maintenance mechanic of the future is going to make more because they need to know a lot more systems than they've ever had to know before. Okay. Other factors influencing truck driving operations, these are just things that are going to affect your industry as a whole. The rise in online shopping, obviously, between the rise in online shopping and increasingly global economy, we've got a lot more stuff moving from point A, from point B. How do we move it? Well, we got to move it the most efficient way possible. Where are my Amazon Prime customers? Have you noticed that when you signed up for Amazon Prime, you now get stuff all the time? You don't even think about going shopping, right? And why do you do that? Because you know that you can get it tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, and it's not going to cost you a dime. Who is it costing? Oh, everything has a cost. And at some point in time, it's the transportation companies that are passing it back to the original companies. Are they passing on all the costs? There are the challenges going on. Okay, so we'll get a little of that later. 3, technology improves the connectivity for brokered freight. Peer-to-peer electronic logistics improve delivery times, yada, yada, yada. So this whole notion of having a company like Uber get into the freight logistics business tells you that there are going to be things like new players, old trucking companies that are not embracing or at least understanding some of these technologies, how they change the brokered business in long-haul trucking, but even in short-haul trucking. You're going to see some new names that you've never seen before, and they're going to be technology companies. They are not necessarily going to be old-line trucking companies. These are some influences that we see going on in the labor market. All right. Factors affecting shortages of truck drivers. Competition for CDL holders. All right, so does anybody know how many CDL holders there are in the state of Texas? Does anybody know?
Presumably about 80,000.
Well, no, CDL holders in the state. Not truck drivers, CDL holders.
CDL holders, okay.
The reason why you don't know is because the Department of Public Safety doesn't make that data available to anybody. Now, if you want to give me a call, I have an open records request into them to actually get that number. And so this morning I got a call, and I know that there are 684,415 CDLs that are currently available. Now, how many other people are competing for those CDL license holders? And how many other options do those CDL holders have in terms of employment? And the answer is you are competing in a very hot field in a labor market that has general labor shortages, which is one of the reasons why you've got your problem. Your labor turnover issue is very high. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because you know all about that already. The demographics, your demographics do not align well in any way, shape, or form with the emerging demographics of the state, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. Supply constraints enticing non-driving CDL holders back into the profession. If you've got 80 and 90,000 truck drivers and you've got almost 700,000 CDL holders, do you have a bunch of people that are on the sidelines? And the answer is, yeah, you probably do. Why are they on the sidelines? Cocktail party factoid number 1. Did you know that we have registered nursing shortage? Have you heard about the registered nursing shortage? Did you know if you took everybody that maintains their license, their nursing license, that maintains a current nursing license, and you brought them back into the labor market, you would obliterate the nursing shortage? They don't come back because of all kinds of essentially supply-driven issues. They don't like to work in the hospitals, they don't like the relationship, they don't like the pay, they don't like all kinds of different things. So not every issue is a workforce issue. Some of this is the workplace issues, the branding and how you present your company, how you present quality, workplace environment, like big issue here. Quality versus quantity. In some ways, you've got a lot of people that walk through your doors, but we have a shortage of quality workforce, not necessarily quantity workforce. Even though we've got a little bit of both, it's the quality issue that holds it up. And last but not least is what's really killing you is that young people are not interested in the transportation industry. And they are not really interested in becoming drivers. And that's a big deal. And a lot of it has to do with perceived lifestyle challenges, all right? Anybody heard of the term little emperors? In China, they've got a whole generation of college graduates that refuse to go to work in the manufacturing sector. They want to go to work in banking and government and finance. Why? Because the environment is really nice and clean and just beautiful. They could make twice the money going to work in the manufacturing sector with those same skills. But they're willing to take half the money to be in this clean environment. The term in China is called little emperor. Are we growing any little emperors in Texas? I think the answer is we probably are. That's an attitude thing, but it is your labor force. We're going to talk about that here. Look at this. Here's your demographics. This is the U.S. demographics. Notice that when we look at just truck and route drivers right here, look at the percentage of your impact on women. And look at the percentage relative to all workers of 45 and over, and your percentage of 25 and younger. On all the key demographics of where your next labor force is coming from, you are underrepresented. There's some other interesting statistics there as well. All right, where's your population growth happening in the state? Everything that's in this sort of purple and blue is where your population growth. It is largely happening in that Texas triangle. Almost 75% of all the population growth between 2010 and 2016 has been in that Texas triangle. Shouldn't surprise you. This is where that population growth is taking place. Anybody been to Houston lately? Okay. Even with the decline in oil, I think I was down there in Katy the other day. I think I saw all 481,000 on the freeway. I mean, it was a mess. All right. All right, but you've got population growth. Look at that. Harris, Bexar County, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, Plano, Sugar Land. See all those counties where you have the most population growth? Where is it? It's in that Texas triangle. Okay. This is why your impact in the youth community makes a big difference. Okay. This is a chart that's a generational percentages. Anybody been to one of those generational seminars and they talk this about old people like, and this is what young people like, and this is how you appease young people, and this is how you put the ping pong table and the jet ski and all that stuff. This is why we care about this stuff. In 2005, 14% of the Texas workforce was this millennial generation. Those are people born between 1980 and 2000. By 2015, 35, almost 36% of the workforce were the millennials. So look at the blue bars, or the green bars. This is their progression in the labor market. See this 40%? These were our baby boomers. This is their representation in the labor market. What is your penetration in each one of those segments? And the answer is not in line with the trend of the growth in the labor force, and that becomes a challenge to you. Now you start talking about, that's why I went to that generational seminar, because they were trying to tell me that the future labor force that I have maybe is looking for some different things, and how do I at least play into that, or at least understand it, so that for my own internal branding we can do something about that, okay? I mentioned this one. This is Texas labor shortage, more jobs than there are workers. This red line here is the number of workers in the civilian labor force. Blue line is jobs. Obviously, this is the recession, and this is the recovery from the recession. And you'll notice here over the last about 3 years, you're actually creating more jobs than the labor force, available labor force. What's that doing? It's pulling all the best labor force participants forward. For those of you that like numbers, I don't care what year you pick, we've essentially got more job growth than you've got civilian labor force. And in fact, when you look between 2010 and 2017, almost an 18% growth, job growth, 10% growth in the labor force, right? So talk about general labor shortages. You are a victim of general labor shortages in addition to your underrepresentation in the growth of the labor force, the segments that are growing the fastest. So from a purely demographic standpoint, you have some really important challenges. Okay. Unemployment rates, I mentioned that. When you've got unemployment rate in Amarillo 3.1, Austin 3.2, Lubbock 3.2, we have a technical term for that in economics. It's called if you can fog a mirror, you can get a job. All right? Now, some of you may have hired some of those people inadvertently, all right, because you didn't pay attention to your internal marketing and branding. But the truth of the matter is, labor force issues right here, these people right here, general labor shortages across the board. Okay. Here's our exception. to that population growth, and we talked about oil and gas a little bit. This is really when I have time for. But when you start looking at the percent change in population, you have the Texas Triangle, but you have two areas right here. Anybody recognize those two areas? One is the Permian Basin, and the other one is the Eagle Ford Shale area, right? So we have population growth. Here is an example for those of you that always want to know the answer to the question, do population follow jobs or do jobs follow people? The answer is both. But in this case, we've got people following jobs. Here's the industries that have been adding the most jobs. Industries that have been adding the most jobs between 2012 and 2016. This is absolute change, percent change. Anything interesting about this list? What do they all look like? Most of them are all service-related industries, right? Now look at this slide. Here are the industries employing truckers, okay? And the percentage of their staffing pattern, percent of all their workers in this industry that are truckers. Absolute change, percent change. Anything interesting here? Notice how many of these sectors are in the infrastructure, that are in the manufacturing, and are related to the oil and gas sector. So if you see variations in the demand and supply for truck driving, and you see that they are moving in the same line as the demand for everything up and down the oil and gas supply chain, including the manufacturing side and the shipping of valves and pipes and all the rest of that stuff, you see that this is one of the reasons why that happens. Okay, obviously a lot of conversations about that. But if you look at the online job postings, what has been available in the last 90 days, which occupations there is more online job posting activity, this is what it looks like. Does this surprise anybody? Now my colleagues look at this and they go, well damn, there's 18,000 jobs sitting right out there for truck drivers right now. The occupation that has more job postings than any other. I tell them that yes, it's probably at the top of the list, but I will guarantee you that that's a part of that is a fishing expedition. There's a lot of companies that have so much turnover that they have constant ads. They're always looking, they're always recruiting, fishing in the labor market. So I doubt whether there's actually 18,000 jobs. But the truth of the matter is, in addition to all of this general labor shortage stuff we've been talking about, the demand for truck drivers continues to be at the top of our occupational spectrum. Oh, and by the way, this is what it looked like in July of 2015. You'll notice a lot of negatives here, even a negative here, right? But not near as negative as some of these others. So the demand has essentially held up. So if you have the demand holding up over time, is that also contributing to your labor shortage? The answer is yes. Okay. Online job, so same job, online job postings, both for light truck and delivery drivers, and also for heavy truck drivers. You'll recognize some of these names. Interestingly, notice on this side, which is the fastest growing of the two sides, the light truck and the rural route delivery folks. What do we see here? You got a lot of short haul, small intra-metropolitan delivery services. That's where your Amazon Freight and some of those others are showing up as well. Okay. I'm almost wrapping up here, but let me show you a couple more charts. This is the annualized earnings in Texas for the transportation industry as a whole. So I've got actually 5 of them. General freight trucking, urban transit systems, those are mostly bus drivers. School and employee bus drivers, specialized freight trucking, and what is that one? Taxi and limousine services, okay? See anything interesting about all of those lines? If there are true shortages, as we established early on, what should these lines be doing? They should be rising concomitant, or actually inverse, to the shortage situation. But what do you see? Truth of the matter is, which one is this one? This was this specialized freight trucking, 55.4. It was 55.3 6 years ago. All right. So what you don't see in the data, at least at the industry level, what you don't see in the data are increases in wages that would be concomitant to our perception of the shortage. All right. Which tells us a little bit that pay kind of is probably part of the issue going forward. All right. And the other part of a quality workforce are characteristics that you want in your workers. How many of you talk about soft skills these days? All right. Oh, I get a lot of people in the door, but I can't find anybody to exhibit the local brand that I want to do. I want to see that teamwork. I want to see people working together. I want a dedication and communication, all these kinds of things. Oops, excuse me. When you start describing what a soft skill is, I like to say it's kind of like pornography. You know it when you see it, but it's really hard to define, in the grand scheme of things. All right, so some of us had to go a long way for that, but it's still interesting, all right? In truth, it kind of looks like this, all right? Be personable, don't be a drama queen, don't be a game player, contribute to a positive environment, have the ability to develop rapport with clients and colleagues, have and use common sense. Oh my God, what an enormous high bar that is, all right? Be a Socratic thinker, in other words, be willing to think about your environment. That kind of leads to that critical thinking thing we talk a little bit about. Be clean and take care of hygiene, all right? Again, novel concepts, but you'd be surprised how many people show up. And I'm not talking about truckers, all right? I'm talking about everybody across the labor market. So, Kim asked me to talk about some success stories about where certain companies and where certain companies and aspects of the labor market are being successful in recruiting and dealing with their shortage issues. Let me give you a couple of things here. One, Werner Trucking. Werner Trucking is working with Lee College actually in the prisons to recruit prison trustees, which are those people that are sort of on the tail end about ready to be released. And for those that don't have any felonies that related to their, to commercial driving, there's those that might be eligible to be able to get a CDL. They're actually paying for CDL through Lee College, and they're recruiting. Werner Trucking can't get enough of those folks coming out of the prison system and have been extremely happy so far with what they've been doing. So truth of the matter is they are making additional investments in the Lee College to try to increase the number of people that are getting into that program. When I asked my colleagues in the workforce system how they're dealing with truck drivers, this is what they told me. They said, well, truth of the matter is we've got to do a whole lot better recruiting because we have taken a lot of the folks that have come into our office and they say, well, what do you want to do? Well, I want to be a truck driver. Great. Without really assessing sort of their aptitude and their interest and their understanding of the lifestyle and everything that portends. So what happens in the workforce system? You got a lot of come through, they get their CDLs, they get their first job, right? Not really a problem given the shortage situations to get the first job, and then what happens to them? They're there for 3 months, they're there for 6 months, and they go, man, nobody told me it was like this, right? And they're gone. In the workforce system, this is welcome to your government, in the workforce system, that means that you got a placement, but your retention after placement and your earnings after placement, which are two key metrics, go through the floor. That's not good. So they are actually slowing down the number of people that are referring to truck driving occupations because of the retention issue. And because that retention issue is so important to them and their performance metrics, how they're being held accountable, they're doing a lot more screening and screening and assessment up front as to whether this person would be a good candidate. Number 3, it is clear from the data, as somebody looks from the outside in of labor shortages and every aspect here, that turnover is driven by lifestyle and pay. Lifestyle and pay, right? Pretty simple. Investigate pay policies that encourage retention. And you heard a lot of really good information about different kind of pay policies and how that does. I'm not going to go into that, but the truth of the matter is these are two big issues that need to be revisiting. And last but not least, for those of you that don't think that autonomous trucking and technology will at some point in time influence your world, I think you're wrong. And I would say that to some degree, understand and embrace autonomous vehicles to automate, especially the long-haul components of truck routes, shortening the length of time on the road and away from home. A lot of millennials say the reason why we don't want to get into trucking is we don't want to be away from our, not necessarily our families, although that counts too, but our ecosystem, our cocoon, our home base. They don't want to be too far away from that. So trying to reduce the time, the percentage of time that they can be at home, reduce the time they have to be on the road are big deals, especially to the millennials. And then letting technology serve as a useful co-pilot as it goes forward, especially for rural point-to-point routes. So with that, I thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Hope you have a great conference. All of these slides are available to you. You'll take care of them, right? With that, thank you very much. Enjoy your bartender. Make sure you tip.